Hello everyone, this is Tim, and this is going to be a quick review of Novus, which is a new RPG by the author Tim Duggar, who is known for his work on high adventure role-playing, or HARP, and also lots of Rollmaster supplements. The basic dice mechanic of Novus is a 2d10 added in any bonus, plus or minus modifiers, and you have to get greater than or equal to the target number to have success. And the target number is determined by the GM. Also, with this 2d10 mechanic is the possibility of imploding dice if you roll 1s, or exploding dice if you roll 10s, and if you roll a 10 and a 1, that's called a Nova roll, and you actually get a fate point for that. Saving throws are based on stats, so there are 8 stats in the game, hence 8 saving throws. In a round of combat, you have 5 action points to spend on various actions. Armor reduces damage, so it's like damage reduction. And there's a base damage based on weapons, and then if you roll high, you can add damage to that. As well as if you roll so high, you might be able to have boon points, which you can spend on things right then and there to either increase damage, maybe they fall over. There's a chart talking about that. In the system, death and dying is pretty lenient. You have a pretty good amount of hit points, and you don't die until you have minus your con stat plus 10. So yeah, death is pretty easy to avoid. Like I said before, there's 8 saving throws, and spells have spell points. So it's not like the Vancian magic from old school Dungeons & Dragons or the Dungeons & Dragons further editions. The book goes through a character creation overview, and then goes through each step individually to help you flesh out your character more. Like a character concept, you go through your race, you have a background, which gives you bonuses to skills. You have a class that doesn't have a lot of information on them, they're not very crunchy, but I think there's enough there to get you started. And it's mainly about the skills, and the options you pick, like talents, and combat moves and spells. Talks about your stats, how to develop your character with your character points, or CPs. Then you equip your character, and tally up all the bonuses. The races in the game have +5, -5 to stats with 2 special abilities, or +3, -3 with 3 special abilities for the half races. So they're a little bit different. Each race goes through and talks about movement as so much movement in feet per action point spent. As I said, you have 5 action points in a combat round. The classes in the game have favored skills, which are cheaper to purchase than other skills. They also have suggested prime stats and special abilities, and the classes that are available are Archer, Fighter, Mage Classic, and Mage Dual, and Cleric is actually underneath the Mage there, so it's probably slightly different than you're used to. There's a Martial Artist, a Minstrel, a Scout, and a Thief, and they're all a little bit different and have their own specialties. They said there's 8 stats in the game: Charisma, Constitution, Dex, Intelligence, Speed, Strength, Willpower, and Wisdom. And again, saving throws are based on those. The various ways to generate stats. You can have a stat array or a dice roll method. There's defense in the game, which is basically like armor class in other systems. And fate points. Fate points are nice in this game because they have slight narrative control as well as other options to keep your character alive, do interesting things. So I know a lot of people out there, especially if you're a story gamer, like to have a little bit more narrative control as a player. There are 19 main skills in this game, but some of the skills sort of open up into other specific skills. So it may look like it's a very small skill list, but there's room there to grow if you want to specialize in certain areas. Also, skills increase in cost the higher the rank is, so it has that nice learning curve, and there's a little chart to show you how that works. The game gives out a nice array of free starting equipment for characters, and I think this cuts down on the character shopping spree that you usually have at the beginning of the campaign. My only complaint is that costs are in various coinages, and I've always kind of wanted RPGs to have, like, just costs in silver pieces, but thankfully most of the things are in silver pieces here. For combat, you're going to roll 2d10 plus the attack bonus, which is the combat skill that you're using. And then if this is greater than or equal to the defensive target number of your opponent, then you hit. So whatever their defense is, that's the target number you're looking for. Each weapon has a base damage associated with it, so if you have like a broadsword, it does like 8 or 9 damage. And on top of that, for every 1 point over the defensive target number that you roll, you add an extra damage. So if you rolled 5 over their defense, you add 5 damage. So this is nice if you roll really well, especially with an exploding dice mechanic, you can do a lot of damage. Also, for every 10 points over the defense you get a boon point. And there's a little chart for how you can spend these boon points for more damage, various effects, maybe they trip and fall over, things like that. And once the damage is all totaled up, the armor rating of your opponent reduces the damage that you dealt. So this is basically damage reduction. Like I said, the combat round is 5 seconds long, and you have 5 action points to spend for various things. And combat moves can cost more action points depending on what you do. There's some free combat moves, but there's also combat moves you can pay for. Initiative in this system is 2d10 plus the speed bonus plus the wisdom bonus, and you keep your initiative for the whole combat. And the slowest characters declare first, and then actions are resolved from fastest character to slowest character. In the rules, there are firing into combat, opportunity attacks, and control zones, but these are things I don't usually like in my RPGs, but they're there for those who do. Each spellcaster in the game has various schools to choose from, and depending on what school you choose, it basically determines what kind of spellcaster you are. So normally most spellcasters only have one school of magic, but let's say you wanted to have multiple schools, then you would have different spellcasting skills for each school. You have to purchase every spell with CPs, and the costs are different based on if your class is a major or minor adept. As an added touch, each school also has a casting style that adds a nice level of distinctiveness to the different types of casters, and it also talks about the source of the magic, where that magical energy comes from, which I think is a nice touch. One thing to note is that you are rolling for each spell, so there's a chance for spells to fail. And also the powerful spells have higher casting target numbers. Basically, these are the target numbers you need to hit with your spellcasting skill roll to see if the spell goes off. So when you're choosing your spells, and you're, let's say, a young or a low-level character, try to pick those spells with lower target numbers at first until you advance to higher levels. Because if a spell has a high casting target number, you're not going to be able to cast it as often if you're unskilled. You can cast spells with armor, however armor has impedance, which basically tells you how many extra spell points you need to spend to cast spells in armor. So if you're going to run around as a tank, be sure to have a lot of extra spell points because you're going to need them to cast it through that armor. When you cast spells, they also have casting boons. For every 10 points over the casting target number that your roll is, you get a boon point, and you have various options for how to spend that to increase the number of targets, the damage of the spell, etc. There's also rules in the game for counter spells, for other, counterspelling other spells being cast at you, and there's casting options for various extra spell points. You can have the spell do different and unusual things. For those GMs that want to have a little bit of a darker feel to their game, there's a little section on summoning and rituals, and I think there's a nice basis here for a GM who wants to do these things, but there's also room for interpretation. There is a GM section of the book called Running Novus, and it goes through basically just tips for GMs, things that you'd hear us talk about on YouTube, things like how to do saving throws, what target numbers should be set, opposed rolls, opposed saves, just different things to help you out. Things like occupational hazards, how to set up things like falling damage, heat, cold, things that you normally see in a GM section or Dungeon Master's Guide. How healing works, how spell points are regenerated, which actually regenerate pretty quickly. Things like death and dying. If GMs want to make clerics more unique, they can set up spheres of influence depending on what their gods worship, etc. There's also a nice creature and treasure section in the back, which doesn't have a lot of information on all the monsters, but for as small a book as this is, it's very informative, and it gives you enough to get going. I'm sure that any GM, once they look at these monsters, will be able to make their own monsters from them. In the treasure section, there's a table there to determine random wealth, though the author suggests that most of the time GMs should determine what objects and what wealth is in dungeons or adventures that you are running. There's magic items, herbal remedies, and I like that herbs are included here. I think that goes back to my Rollmaster and Merp days. I tend to prefer herbs over healing potions and such. But there are healing potions, scrolls, magic weapons and armor, amulets, rings, jewelry, and miscellaneous items. There's a 2-page character sheet that I'm proud to say that my playtest group has, put in their 2 cents, and the changes were made. I think the character sheet's a lot better than it was before. So thanks, Tim, for taking our advice. I think it worked out well. It was nice to have playtest feedback make a change in a game. And I don't know if I mentioned that before, but we playtested this game a lot. We had a midnight game we ran for a long time, and I enjoyed running it, and it was fun. And last but not least, there's an index at the end of the game. So Novus, for me, is a nice system if you want to do something non-D20, sort of try something new. It has lots of options that I've liked in various RPGs, collected all into one. And I recommend it. So if you're looking for a new RPG, try Novus. Thanks for watching and listening.